Okay, today I'm going to show you how to trace the first shoe properly. So the very first thing you need to do with any one of these tracing files is you need to make sure that it fits completely on the page. You can see your page right here is this square or rather rectangle outline, and you can see that the shoe is much larger than that. So what I want to do is I want to zoom out, and you're going to zoom out the same way that you would in Photoshop. So I'm going to click on my little zoom arrow there. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and I'm simply going to click out so that I can see the entire thing. Then I'm going to get my black selection arrow, and I'm going to click on that item, and I'm simply going to hold shift, go to the corner. You can see it's turned into this little double arrow, and I'm going to shrink it down so that it fits on one page. All right, that way it's going to be a little bit easier to work with. And remember, in Illustrator versus Photoshop, it's okay to make things bigger and smaller once you've drawn it out. So once that's the size I want, I'm just going to click back off of it so it's no longer selected. I'm going to zoom back in, and I can also use Alt and then my scroll wheel to zoom in. I can also hold down the space bar to move my screen around. Again, those are the same as they are in Photoshop. And now what I want to do is create a new layer as well as lock this layer out so that I can trace it. So I'm going to go to my layers panel, and if you don't have layers listed over here, it looks like two little pieces of paper on top of it. Simply click on Window and make sure that when you go down, you can click on Layers right there, and it'll pop that out. Now I want to double click on that layer, and do not double click on the name itself because that'll ask you to rename it. Just double click out here next to it. It pops up this screen right here. I'm going to hit lock and dim to 50%. All right, and if I wanted to name it at this point, I could do so. What that's doing is it's going to make sure that I don't accidentally write on that layer, and that it's going to kind of dim it out so that I can see a little more easily. So I'm going to hit OK at this point. Now I need to make a new layer. And to make that new layer, again, just like it is in Photoshop, I'm going to click on the Create New Layer tab. Looks like a little Post-it note. And now you can see I've got layer 2 there. So what we're working with is going to be the pen tool. And the pen tool is this one that's right up here in the top left corner. Make sure you get the regular pen tool, not this curvature tool. Okay. So we're going to work with the pen tool. And you have to understand these colors down here. So what I have right now is a white fill with no stroke. That means no line. So if I started trying to draw right now, what it's going to look like is that it's erasing stuff, but it's not really erasing anything. So the easiest way of doing this is I'm going to double click on, I'm going to click one time on this fill. I'm going to click on that little none icon right down here to the right. Someone's a little red line through it. All right, then I'm going to click on my stroke. And now I'm going to double click on that stroke so that I can get a color. And I'm going to use a different color for each one of these. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that, but it's something that might help you out. So I'm going to go with red for the first part. And I'm going to start on the bottom of the shoe right here. And I'm going to click one time. I'm going to go to the top part here. I'm going to click and drag out so that it will completely follow that line, or follow it as best as possible. And I am going to go a little bit fast through these tracing files, but you'll get the idea of it. One thing that I look for when I'm grading these is how clean and crisp you can make all of these lines, how well they are going to follow. So now you can see I can't go back down here because it wants to continue curving up. So I'm going to have to break that line. And to do so, I simply click right there in the center on that anchor point. And now I can come down to this bottom part. And I'm going to click and drag again. And again, I'm going to have to click on that center, on that anchor. And now I'm going to click and drag over to this area right around here. Looks good. And again, it's going to try to pull it. Actually, it looks like if I go over here, I'm going to follow that line fairly well. So I don't have to break the anchor this time. I'm going to go right back to about this section here. I'm going to click one time there. Now I can go up to this top part. I'm going to click, and I'm just going to drag it out just a little bit to try to follow that line out. I'm going to click on the anchor again. I'm going to go down to this section right here, and it's hard to tell if there's a little curve there or not. I'm going to do a straight line though, so I'm just going to click one time. I'm going to click and drag just a little bit right there. I'm going to break my anchor again by clicking in the center. I'm going to go down just slightly. I'm going to go straight over to about this section. Now I'm going to click up here and drag out just a little bit. And make sure you don't drag too far, because if you do, you see that line starts to pull out. So I'm just barely dragging out. Generally, you don't want that handle to go past that previous line. So I'm going to click to right about there. And now I can honestly probably go all the way back up to my anchor. You'll see I get that little circle. That tells me I've completed my shape. And I can click and drag out to here, and I can follow that same line all the way across through that way. All right, and so now if I turn off that original layer, you'll see I've got a pretty good copy of that shoe going there. Okay, so that's what the first shape should look like. You're going to end up with 4 shapes on this one. The next one that we want to do is we want to draw out this heel right here. Now, there's a few things you can do. What happens with a lot of students is they'll want to come up here and they'll want to start clicking, but if you start clicking up here, you're going to end up on that same path. So what you can do, if you want to make sure you don't accidentally click over the same path, is you can click on that original drawing you have, or I'm sorry, click on the one that you just created, and you can see I've got that highlighted. And now if I go to the top, I can do Object, Lock, Selection, and now I can't select that. I can't accidentally click on it again. So we'll do that throughout here just to kind of make things a little faster. Next thing I want to do is I want to go with a different color. So I'm going to go with, let's say, a kind of purplish color here. And again, I'm going to get my pen tool. I'm going to start right down here in this corner. I'm going to simply click straight across here. I'm going to go up really to about this section right here. I'm going to pull it on over. I'm going to break my line right there. Make sure that it goes to that anchor. You'll see that you change from just a regular pen tool. You'll get that little carrot top looking thing next to it. That's how you know you're on the anchor, and it'll pop up and say anchor. So I click on that. Now I can go straight back over to about here. I'm going to pull my line out so that it kind of matches up. All right, and I'm going to break my anchor again. I'm going to go to about here, and I'm going to pull straight down, and now I can actually continue all the way down to there. And now you can see, again, if I turn that off, I've got 2 different shapes, and that's generally what you want it to look like. So now we're going to click on that one again. I'm going to lock that down so I can't accidentally mess with it. So Object, Lock, Selection. All right, so now you see both of those are locked. So I'm going to get my pen tool one more time. I'm going to click on my stroke color. This time I'm going to go with a kind of aqua blue, and I'm going to create this one down here. So I'm going to start again in this bottom corner. I'm going to click one time. I'm going to go straight across to there. I'm going to click up to about here. I'm going to go over. I'm going to click back down. And now you can see I've created that piece. And the last one that I want to do, and I don't need to lock that one because I know that I'm not going to accidentally hit it, is going to be, let me change my color here to green. I'm going to go and do this piece right over here. So I'm going to click, again, I'm going to start in this bottom corner. I always start in the bottom corners away from the other lines just to make it a little easier on myself. There's no real reason that you have to, but that's just where I'm comfortable going. So I click on that. I'm going to go over to about here before that curved area starts. I'm going to click. Now I'm going to click up to about here, and then I'm going to drag that out a little bit. I'm going to break my anchor again. I'm going to come back to, let's say, about here, click and drag that out. And since I've drug it out straight, I actually don't even need to break that anchor. So I'm going to go all the way across to here, and I'm simply going to go down again and get that circle next to it. I can now click. And now, again, if I turn off that original, you'll see that I have 4 different individual shapes. If I wanted to at this point, I could now unlock that. So unlock all. And I can click on those individually and color those in. So in order to do a fill color, all I have to do is simply switch the colors out here. So I've got a stroke right now. I can get rid of my stroke and go to a fill. And now you can see that I've got a filled color for each one of those. And it looks the way that, in general, that it should. And that's what you want to do on that very first project, or rather the second tracing file that's going to be the shoe.